You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air. At the beginning of this new year and new administration, we wanted to take some time to look ahead at what trends, challenges, and opportunities lie on the horizon for tech transfer professionals and IP practitioners. Our guest today is Eli Mazour, an intellectual property attorney with Foley Lardner and the host of the Clause 8 podcast. Eli is known for his intricate understanding of the patent system and his unique ability to help clients build valuable, litigation-ready patent portfolios that drive business goals. He's also a trusted voice on patent policy and legislative developments. Eli and I will be discussing predictions on how the new administration could shape patent and intellectual property policy, the potential direction of Congress on patent reform, and how cutting-edge technologies like AI are influencing IP strategy. If you work in tech transfer, you won't want to miss Eli's expert take on how these changes might affect your office's priorities, partnerships, and patent portfolios. Welcome, Eli. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Lisa. Thank you for having me on Autumn on the Air.
Really excited to have you on the podcast. And boy, did 2024 just fly by so quickly. And we're in 2025, brand new year and a new administration. It's going to be a very interesting year.
Yeah, it's one of those exciting times, and I guess for patent attorneys and the government, where everybody's thinking about what's next, there's a lot of changes in government that might impact that.
Absolutely. And I thought maybe the best way to kick our conversation off today was to start with the big picture. What do you think some of the major factors are going to be that's going to shape the incoming administration's approach to IP in 2025 and maybe even beyond?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a fun debate going on about who's going to have an influence in the next administration. If you look at some of the, I guess, bigger players who are involved, who had opinions on patents in the past, Elon Musk might stand out. He famously said that patents are necessary, but his companies, if you look at them, they do obtain patents and they are involved, I guess, in patent issues. The other person, I guess, who's played a pretty significant role is Howard Lutnick. And Howard Lutnick is, of course, the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. I recently had his, past chief IP counsel on my podcast. And Cantor Fitzgerald, famously, or in some ways, obtained a lot of business method patents. They were kind of the leader in that. They were a leader for thinking those are a good thing. And as the chief IP counsel, Dave Boundy, told me that Howard Lutnick actually credits patents for saving the company after September 11th, when most people in the company passed away. So obviously, Howard Lutnick didn't only lead Trump's transition efforts, but he's going to be in charge of the Commerce Department, which oversees the PTO. In reality, from talking from other people in those positions, between the PTO director and the Commerce Secretary, it's a big chain of people, right?
A huge chain, yep.
Yeah. And, so usually when you use PTO director, you just want, 5 minutes with the Commerce Secretary or 5 minutes with his chief of staff. But here you have kind of a Commerce Secretary coming in who is interested and believes in the patent system. So I think that's going to have a big impact in playing a role. The other thing was that I guess if you look at everything that's happened in the past administration, and I've talked about it and written about it, is you could boil it down to one thing on patent stuff: is drug prices are too high. It's a fault of a patent.
Yeah, Martin, right. This whole patenting myth when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Yeah, that was a big issue during the Biden administration, for sure.
Exactly. And obviously something that kind of deeply impacts the members of Autumn. And a lot of the policies, proposals that were rolled out kind of were to theoretically somehow lower drug prices, and some of them were very aggressive. I mean, some of the positive efforts, I think, to bring in people into the patent system, I know you've covered like DI a lot. Even those efforts, I mean, some of them were laudable, but I think in some ways they were a distraction to the core functions of what the patent office needs to be doing, which is examining patent applications and examining trademark applications, and I guess some of the post-grant stuff. So I think we ended up with a situation, and we have huge backlog. I think there's a fire alarm bells about not having enough examiners to deal with the backlog. There's a lot of creative solutions that they're trying to throw at the problems, but there's a huge backlog. You can play around with the data all you want, but it is what it is. And you're almost going to a situation, at least I'm sure you remember this, it's like before David Kappas came in.
I remember that time where the backlog was just huge. And do you remember, did you visit the PTO during that time? Because I did, and they had like this football field kind of set up like this diagram, and they had like a football moving across the field as they reduced the backlog. But I remember at that time, it was over 700,000 applications, because I remember staring at this little easel that they had set up with this football field going, oh my God. And I think we're pretty much back to that now.
Exactly. No, I never. That's a good story. But I mean, obviously, that was like whatever the other stuff that was going on. That was like on David Kappas's plate when he came in, and I think that's going to be on this administration. They're going to have to deal with it. There's no way to kind of ignore the system. The other thing is, obviously, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think like it's going to be a simple answer, but I think the combination of Howard Lutnick being there, who's going to be kind of focused on these day-to-day, the administration, I don't think it's going to be as White House-driven patent policy as it was in this past administration. So I think they're going to have room to do that. The other piece that I think was going on in the last administration, and there's kind of an interplay between all this, is that and we'll get to that, is there's stuff going on in the Hill, right? And the USPTO wasn't able to provide any real support for that, for those reasons I first discussed, to the frustration, obviously, of everybody trying to kind of make improvements on the Hill. So I think there's kind of openings for that as well. And I think if you saw, I guess, during Trump's first term, Iancu kind of tried to fix a lot of these issues, but he tried to fix them in a way which I guess the next administration was able to kind of undo pretty quickly. I think this administration will kind of see that recent kind of lesson, and will kind of, I think, I don't know, but I guess my hope would be it will kind of take that to heart and kind of focus on, hey, how can we actually make changes that kind of withstand a test of time, which obviously, as in all government, involves kind of a lot of consensus building and so forth. So it won't be done in a vacuum.
No, for sure. It's going to be really fascinating to watch. And just one other comment, talking about Howard Lutnick, you mentioned he's credited with keeping Cantor Fitzgerald afloat after 9/11, and the success of business method patents was one of those reasons. So do you think maybe between him and Congress, maybe finally see PARA get through something done on subject matter eligibility? Because that's still a big issue. I'm a life science patent attorney. I run into that issue a lot in the diagnostic space, an area that a lot of tech transfer offices have a lot of technology on. So kind of curious if you think we'll see something change on that front.
Yeah, this is a statement against interest, because in my private practice, what I help is clients who deal with a lot of Section 101 issues on the computer software space. But I think it hangs over the heads of any company that obtains patents for anything, because you see some of these examples out there, and when you see some of these decisions, and you're like, well, mine isn't that different. Well, the patents that we're are not that different, depending on the panel that we get at the Federal Circuit. And I think it's like, the innovators are at least, if you're going to say patents are important, if patents are important, there needs to be some kind of predictable logic. And I know there's all these like studies saying, well, it's not that bad, but whatever. But if you talk to people who do this on a day-to-day basis, like we do, who deal with the patent office, know that examiners, the best of examiners, the best of supervisors, going up, they have no coherent, systematic thing to think about Section 101. So I think that's a big issue. But in terms of, I guess, what we saw happening in the last Congress is, there was a para proposal. It was moving, but it never kind of got...
It kind of stalled.
Yeah, it was on the schedule, but it didn't get as far as prevail. And I think it is because it's interesting to see this debate. The big tech companies say, well, it's going to allow everything to get patented. Some of these, inventor groups, US Inventors, for example, on the other say, well, it's going to just keep the status quo, not going to fix anything. And obviously, the truth is somewhere in the middle. But it's kind of it's an issue with passing all patent bills. Once you get, one senator, if you kind of are able to kind of tell some kind of story to one senator who doesn't know anything about patents, but is then kind of able to stall it becomes an issue. So I think we'll see. I mean, the other remaining issue is that all the momentum for these bills was on the Senate side. On the House side, Darrell Issa still remains the chair of the subcommittee for IP. And there was, I guess, a theory that maybe 101 is where he would want to reach some kind of deal. Over last Congress, we didn't see that. If anything, he's still stuck in that pre-AI mindset where trolls over the problem. He's kind of mostly focused on dealing with his petition as the ITC, right?
Yeah.
Kind of making it harder. So I guess I want to be optimistic about this. Iancu was able to do a lot of good just putting the revised guidance in place at the USPTO. And even that, I think, is a huge benefit. If just the examiners have some kind of a way of guidance that they know that they can follow, that they know that the executives there will have their back and are not going to kind of surprise them with being kind of punished for allowing case under 101. I think that helps on that side. But I think you obviously want the predictability after you get the patents. And I think for that, you need to pass para or something like para. So I hope there's momentum. I haven't seen anything to suggest that there's kind of the enthusiasm on the House side to meet what might come in the Senate.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens once things get going under the new administration, but definitely something to watch. So I'm curious, Eli, I wanted to ask you how you see the balance between innovation incentives and market competition evolving under this new administration.
Yeah, so I think as you mentioned, I guess, for example, the Marching rights. Yeah, we won't be seeing things like that. Interestingly, even I think the first thing that Issa did as when he became chair of the subcommittee is kind of push back on that stuff about waiving IP rights. It was back COVID, it kind of seems far away, about waiving IP rights, about the stuff like this, which is obviously one thing is, regardless of what side you're on these patent issues, I think everybody in America believes that, I guess, plays a major role in making policies that almost everybody, we could get to that, I guess, with stuff that was maybe in we'll learn, but almost everybody believes that, the private that it's not the government that is going to be coming up with innovation and commercializing the innovation. That is not the role. The best is the private sector, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it's with nonprofits and so forth. So I think we'll see every balance to that. One thing, and I think some of just thinking about other people who are kind of making up the administration, some people from the Silicon Valley that are coming in, they have mixed ideas about patents and all that. But one interesting thing that I've seen that I know a bit about is in the defense space. It's been a conversation for a long time about, hey, we need more innovation, we need more innovators in the defense space. But the thing that was holding all these commercial companies from engaging in that is like, hey, I don't want to lose all my IP to a government, and then any other all of my competitors can be doing the same thing. So I'm going to be making all this huge investment and then all that. And that's a real fear. I think it's a well-grounded fear for people who deal with government, know how it is. It's you don't, especially if you're a smaller player, you don't have a leverage in those kind of situations. So I think there's an appreciation from Silicon Valley. Now that I see is that, hey, if we want innovation, it's going to come from whatever you want to call it, startups or whatever, and we want to ensure, we want to ensure to create an ecosystem that kind of supports them and will be a win-win for everybody. And the way it'll be a win-win for everybody, is that if we let them keep their IP rights. So I don't know, but I guess it's a hopeful thing for me from that standpoint that if you approach these issues, if you talk to these startups in the defense space, that's something that they don't want to worry about. And if you talk about startups in adjacent areas who are open to that idea, that's something they don't want to be worrying about. So that's I think something I think it's a hopeful. I think it's something that the administration has an ability to do. I think it's been discussed probably, I don't know, for the last, since Bayh-Dole passed, to kind of let's fully put this in place where we give this confidence. And it's been done very successfully with Bayh-Dole, but we need to be doing it kind of across the board, and we can't be sending mixed signals because those kind of mixed signals also, I was talking about the Martian rights going back. I actually interviewed.
That's a mixed signal. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, actually chief IP counsel. He was a former chief patent counsel, general patent counsel of Eli Lilly, now the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and I interviewed him from Clause 8. And he said, just the fact that the Martian right thing was thrown out there, it just changed the discussion about making those investments. And, I'm sitting here thinking like, all right, this is not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't happen, but like that's not how the real world operates in terms of business people who invest a lot of money. They're going to form their own impression on an administration making a threat like that.
Yeah, there was a lot of nervousness because that's an area I practice in. And that for sure was a concern for investors about, will they, won't they? There have been a number of march-in petitions that were filed. And, again, they all were quashed. But, it did really make for some nervous investors. So I completely agree with you on the mixed signals there. I suspect that we may see the end of kind of the government rumblings on march-in rights with the new administration, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Eli, are there particular sectors, maybe healthcare, green energy, AI, I'm sure is one, that you expect to see heightened patent activity or more regulatory focus? It's going to be really interesting. My thoughts are green energy with the incoming administration is going to be interesting to see what happens with that technology.
Yeah, I mean, just about that, I think, things like that, you hear a lot of noise during the campaign, but then there's, already companies and going back, some of these Silicon Valley firms that made huge investments in the green sector already. And even some of these oil and gas companies, huge that we think about, they've already said, hey, not so fast, we shouldn't make the diversion. So I think actually there will be less changes with that than anticipated. In terms of patenting, I think, we've seen it, the AI stuff, we've seen heightened patent activity, not just for AI as a technology itself, but applying AI to all these different areas. And I'm sure kind of any art unit is now dealing it to some level out there. Definitely every tech center out there. It's been, I think, a curve. I think as a technology, obviously, kind of, I think there's some interesting issues that are presented, right, about obviousness is applying AI to healthcare or to automotive, and what's kind of not obvious about it, and obviously there's patent eligibility issues with that as well. So I think we'll definitely can see kind of activity with that. I think what we saw in the beginning is kind of this level surface kind of stuff from companies saying, hey, AI is going to be important. How can we apply it to whatever extra we're doing? I think now you're going to see companies saying, hey, this is our AI solution for what we're doing. So I think that's going to be kind of interesting to see that the innovation regarding AI is going to be taking place within these different companies. And at the USPTO, you saw this thing where, well, when, they were pretty kind of, I guess, if you look at the grant rates, they're pretty liberal about allowing things related to AI in the beginning. And then they kind of started, oh no, they clamped it down as just applying to AI without examiners understanding the AI or whether it's significant or not. And it's a kind of a warning trend where it's like, no. It's like, no, but the key now is not just to reject everything because liberal. So I think that's kind of it's going to be an activity, and we've seen overreaction by the USPTO from that perspective. But I hope there's definitely going to be a lot of patenting related to that, going deeper, definitely in healthcare. That's like one of the most significant applications. And also the most, obviously, like with anything healthcare does, extremely expensive investments that they need to protect with these AI innovations that they come up with. And they deserve to protect them. They don't need to be getting distracted of these endless protracted battles with the Patent Office. So I think it's going to be interesting, but it's complicated stuff, right? The AI is super complicated. So an examiner who's been examining, automotive technology for the last 20 years, adding AI to it, it's going to be kind of a pretty steep learning curve. I think some of the things that the USPTO is doing in terms of bringing in some of these innovators to educate the examiners, I think it's great. And I hope to continue to do that. But I think at the end of the day, it's really the leadership that needs to kind of stress that message that, this innovation is important, and the Patent Office needs to kind of appreciate that and give a reasonable examination, I guess, to those kind of applications.
Yeah, absolutely. Any thoughts on how you think the new administration is going to approach AI-related IP issues? The Biden administration was pretty methodical. They put out notices, put the Patent and Copyright Office on some schedules in terms of when they wanted certain reports and information. Any predictions on how you think the new administration will do in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, going back, the guy they put there's multiple AI czars, and it seems like each one causes different controversy, but David Sachs and others. So, one thing I guess interesting to hear from the AI community, and I heard from Mark Andreessen, who's a Silicon Valley, he's the head of Andreessen Horowitz, which is a big Silicon Valley firm. They made a lot of news for supporting the campaign, but also Sam Altman, who obviously came up with OpenAI. My impression as I was looking, so they've been pretty critical of the past administration's efforts on AI as a whole. My viewpoint was through the IP prism, and I'm like, yeah, they're doing stuff. They're actually keeping ahead of the issues. I thought actually they're staying ahead of the issues more than. Especially at the USPTO itself, I think they have a chief AI officer there, and I thought he did an awesome job. He was brought in by Yanku. I think he really kind of brought that sophistication about these issues. Like I said, they're super complex, and he was kind of ahead of the time on them before anybody else. Before OpenAI, he was talking about them. So I think like within the USPTO, I think there's the infrastructure, whatever. As an administration as a whole, I think obviously I mentioned in the beginning is. I think their vision is, at least the way they communicate it publicly, is that, the role of government is to provide as much support as possible for providing AI innovation within the companies. How does that translate to individual policies? We'll see. We also know it's not going to be a smooth.
No.
It's not going to be a smooth ride. So I think some things that you kind of focus in the beginning might get lost in the shuffle, and the people that we're talking about now, they might kind of like leave for various reasons. But I think that would be the spirit. From my standpoint, it's what actually, I think it was too much for me, to be honest, all the AI stuff, all the policies coming on. And I love to hear kind of stuff, but we had actually, the USPTO actually graciously asked me to moderate a panel on practitioners using AI. And there's a room full of practitioners. And at the end of that panel, I asked the panel, and then I asked practitioners out there, who thinks the administration should put out guidance or policies about practitioners using AI for. The panel was universally opposed to it.
Not a big surprise there. Yeah.
And I raised of hands. Maybe, I don't know, 10 to 30% were for it, but most were overwhelmingly were against it. And then the USPTO still put out the guidance about practitioners using AI. And then there was all these concerns. I mean, Yanko and David Kappas wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal saying, hey, actually, the guidance is kind of suggesting that if you use AI in any kind of way, it needs to be disclosed, which obviously doesn't make sense. We're like, these days, AI is built into all products we use. I've had people from pharma companies coming to me and saying, hey, is this really true? Is this really true? And I went to the USPTO, and actually, when I interviewed the people who had the AI on my podcast, I said, is this really true? And they said, no, it's not true. If you're just using it, but it doesn't come up, if the AI doesn't come up with an invention, you're good. But again, this is the kind of stuff that it's a distraction. It's a distraction for companies. Imagine, company X, they say, hey, this came out, stop using AI in any way. Go back to using typewriters. I'm exaggerating, but it's a huge distraction. It's a huge distraction for these companies that we want to focus on innovation without government things. So hopefully, I hope, I guess it will be from that perspective that I think less is more. But I think you see it from any administration as doing something is proof that you're doing a good job. So that will take, so I'm sure we'll see stuff withdrawing past guidance and all that. But I think it's actually one of the trademarks of last administration. Trump, one of the pluses is that it takes way longer for things to happen. So, yeah.
Have you or your firm, have you guys played with any AI tools or instituted either in prosecution or, drafting?
Our firm has obviously I'm at a pretty large firm, so we have pretty kind of rules about, rules that we try and make sure that they're tested and, that we discuss with clients and all that. But, I think a lot of people have reached out to me, and I've tested a lot of these tools, and I've seen what's out there in terms of drafting and prosecution. And I've seen it, I guess, from various angles, including I've been involved in building some of these tools, both on the drafting and the prosecution side. And I think for the most part, from what I've seen, the tools are still, so I guess the tools, they seem to be all overly focused on solving the problem of how to save attorneys' time. And I think most of the stuff to save attorneys' time could be done through automation, through performing menial tasks. Most of the tools that I've seen so far that try to save time don't do that when they're doing that for an experienced practitioner, because those tools won't do things well in a predictive manner. So the attorney actually ends up spending more time trying to figure out, what did this AI tool do? How can I fix it, and so forth? That's
been my experience as well. I have played with several AI tools from a drafting perspective, and I've also tried prosecution, and that's been my experience. It has taken me longer to clean it up than if I had just started by myself. And I completely agree with you. I think there are other ways to use AI to automate our practice, but as of right now, I'm not finding, for my level of experience, that the AI tools are helping to save my clients any time in terms of drafting or prosecution.
Yeah, and then I think what you're seeing from some of these companies and law firms that are developing these AI tools, they see it as a kind of a marketing thing, like, hey, this is a way you can use AI or whatever, and they're trying to kind of build a cart, cart before the horse, as they say, and they're trying to think about it. But in reality, if you're using those tools uniformly, from what I hear, it's taking more time. But I think it's still worth. I still testing it because I think it's worth seeing what else out there. I think there's something that's going to come. Like the automation tools that I mentioned, like don't rely really on AI, and those save you time and those predictable. So like for example, for proofreading, they've been around a while. Like I'm thinking about Playmaster and Panboss and so forth, and they generate like stuff of your applications that might take your time, but it's involving copy and paste. It doesn't rely on AI. But I think like you said, the application for AI, and actually I really started thinking about it after I interviewed the chief patent counsel for IBM, and he said what really excites him about AI is not saving time on attorney fees. It's making applications more robust. And I know in the pharma space, especially with some of the rumblings about enablement and so forth, there are, and I don't know if some of this case law isn't great, but if you could put your arms around it, maybe there are things that you could flag and that your AI can do that maybe you wouldn't do. At least flag things. And I think flagging things and giving attorneys to think about like the proofreading tools that are out there, I think that's the great stuff. And I actually don't see too many great tools in that area. I mean, I think some of the tools that you do see actually and obviously trade space. Full disclosure, they're a partner of me on my podcast. But for example, there are other tools out there as well that do that. From the moment that you submit the disclosure, they do like prior art searching and so forth that help the attorney think about, the in-house counsel think about like, hey, this is what I should be considering about whether to file this application, about making it more robust. And this is great. I think that's like the kind of those kind of tools really excite me more because, we've seen like it's been hard for patents. It's been hard for patents for the last 10 years, and we need to give them the best chance possible. And some of it's been hard because of some policy changes, but it's been hard because the patents have been pretty bad. And, there are tools to give all practitioners, I guess, an ability to make the patents more robust. I think that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. That's where I've found it to be helpful as well, because if you're talking about like pharma is a great example, if you're talking about like a method of treatment claim, there's a lot of prior art depending on what you're talking about, and using AI to be able to search that, analyze large numbers of applications, some of which are several hundred pages. There's a real benefit and time save there. So I agree. That's where I have found it more useful than trying to draft claims and draft the specification and things like that as well.
And how have you found it, like in terms of like finding prior art? Have those tools?
It's been pretty good. I have been pretty happy. For the most part, I see steady improvement and actually saving much more time than using it as a drafting tool. So I've been pretty happy with it. How about yourself?
Yeah, I've definitely drastic improvement. I've used like there's a tool called Inography that I used like when it first came out with it, and now I'm like no, but I've gone back. I'm like, oh, this kind of at least it's in the realm, and it gives you stuff to think about. So I've been pretty impressed.
So we've talked a little bit about patent reform, and sticking on the AI theme for a little bit. What do you think policymakers should think about regarding the impact of AI-driven innovations on IP frameworks?
Yeah, no, I think it's a kind of that was the hot topic right before OpenAI or whatever. That was a hot topic. What is AI is the inventor, and Ryan Abbott, I had him on my podcast right before that. And it's when I had him on, it was interesting because everybody was like, "What a waste of time! This is science fiction. This is like he's creating an issue where there won't be AI is not going to be inventing anything." And I think now we're getting to a situation where now that we're using AI, we're like, hey, I don't know, maybe the ChatGPT is going to throw out something that I didn't think of, and we're getting kind of close to that. So I think, as clever patent attorneys, client comes with us, we know how to kind of protect innovation in a way that, the humanist of the inventor, right? But, there's issue. First of all, there's the risk, right? If that inventor is going to be deposed, in 12 years, and then they're going to see how they're using AI, is it going to create this kind of unnecessary murkiness that the other side is going to be able to use? And as we've seen, some of these things are unpredictable about this kind of murkiness. The other issue is the issue that Professor Ryan Abbott has been raising for a long time that at least I find compelling is you want transparency, right? You don't want gamesmanship. Well, one issue that you want the kind of then focused on like, hey, this is how we come within that, whatever. So if a company out there says, hey, I used AI and I used this co-inventor or whatever, they should be allowed to do that. And I think we're getting kind of close to that, to doing that. So I think that's something that we should be kept in mind. I don't consider myself like an expert in this topic. And I know some are against this idea and they have other theories about, where the line is about the AI coming up and using it and whatever. Is it giving the prompt or using the prompt, whatever? But I think it's a situation where you don't want gamesmanship, because at the same time the USPTO is like, oh no, disclose us how you use the AI, but it might cause issues in terms of whether your patent can survive. So you don't want that. That's the worst of all worlds. And I think it's kind of maybe make inventorship less important in terms of identifying all the inventors. I think that's maybe the right pathway. You could say, hey, just to your best knowledge, list the inventors who you want to credit with, and allow entities to apply inventors, and that's a way to do it that I think might make sense. But just thinking out loud here.
No, that's great. Now, I want you to think for a second, Eli, if Congress asks you for some advice on strengthening patents, what would be your top recommendations for strengthening innovation and protecting inventors?
Yeah, great question. I think the one you mentioned, PARA.
Passing PARA to subject matter eligibility.
Fixing Section 101. You can come up with any study you want. Reality is it creates an enormous level of uncertainty that I think you want to fix. So I think that's should be the number one priority. I think also the Restore Act, a patent is a right to exclude. These days it's just a theoretical, statement. So I think restoring some kind of predictable rights to get an injunction, whatever it is, let's kind of give those rights. And I think, Prevail, I think in terms of, I think it's a step in the right direction in terms of fixing those PTAB issues. I think Prevail does a good job of fixing things around the edges, which I think is a good move forward, which I think the PTAB is not going away. So I think that's so I think that's kind of you want to be realistic about kind of making those wins. And if we can kind of do those things, I think that'd be good.
Yeah, I think especially with Prevail, there are some very needed fixes that can be done right away, which that would definitely help with. Kind of sticking on the same thread regarding Congress, do you see any bipartisan opportunities for IP reform that you think tech transfer professionals should be aware of in 2025?
Yeah, the tech transfer office, you know more about this than me, but the tech transfer offices, from what I understand, they need the reliability in obtaining their patents, which I think PARA and Prevail are good for that. But also, when they come up with something valuable, they need to be able to appreciate it and not be involved in these like decades-long negotiations, which we've seen, Wharf involved in and Caltech involved in. You see these eye-popping numbers for judgments that never go anywhere. And I think the Restore Act would make that possible, which would make the other side kind of engage in those good faith negotiations. So I think from their standpoint, that's the one I would recommend taking a look at, because I think that one kind of hasn't gotten as much attention, but I think it's kind of would benefit tech transfer offices.
Now, are there any policy shifts or maybe regulatory changes on the horizon that you think might surprise the tech transfer community?
Yeah, I think maybe just to what I was going in the beginning, I think maybe hopefully we'll see an emphasis on allowing the innovators to be more secure in the rights that they come up with. And I know tech transfer offices, obviously, they take funding from the government, and then they try to commercialize their innovations. It's an issue that they run into. So it's not a prediction, but I think I might guess an optimistic change that might be on the horizon.
So looking beyond patents, what's one broader trend in IP or maybe innovation that excites you for this new year? And how do you think tech transfer professionals should prepare for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what we discussed about AI, I think it's the main thing. I've listened to your podcast, so I know it's kind of on top of the mind in terms of not just coming up with the innovations in the vacuum, but actually meeting, the companies that are going to commercialize where they are, and where the companies are figuring out how to actually make AI work for them and benefit them instead of just wasting resources and wasting time and all that. So I think kind of there's a huge level of appetite for that to help. It's a very hard problem to solve. I know companies that you would think like all they do is they talk about AI publicly, but internally they're struggling. They're struggling. Hey, how do we actually leverage it? So I think there's a huge appetite for that kind of thinking and leveraging. And obviously, tech transfer offices who work with a lot of different innovators have a benefit of getting that perspective and having that vantage point. And obviously, academics who kind of are at the forefront of this, I think they're really valuable resources for that reason.
Well, Eli, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your insightful predictions and expertise on what's ahead in IP and tech transfer. It's going to be a very interesting year to watch.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
It definitely was. Thanks again, Eli. To everyone tuning in, be sure to check out Eli's podcast, Clause 8, for more in-depth conversations on patent law and innovation. See you next week on the air.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.